When this young man bought his first home, he looked at it as nothing more than a milestone in his life and a sign of what was to come. Little did he know that that quaint little home at the end of the road would be the catalyst for one of the most surprising moments of his entire life. This young man was named Bradley. He had been working his way up his management career since he graduated. He had now achieved his next milestone, which was to own his very own home. He had signed the final papers an hour ago, the previous owners over lunch, and he felt extremely delighted, proud, and blessed that he was a homeowner. This was not just any home. It was the most sought-after house in this high-end neighborhood. It had a big lawn and an equally big pool. The entrance was made of stone and the rooms inside were large and welcoming. He could not believe the owner had sold it at such a reasonable price. At first he had been apprehensive about buying such a big house when it was just him and his soon-to-be wife. However, the previous owner, a very persuasive, smooth-talking, charming man, convinced him that it was a great property and it would be smart to get it now rather than later when the market prices went up and the cost would triple. Bradley did not need to be persuaded any further after this. He shook hands with the gentleman and they signed the papers that officially transferred ownership to him. He noticed that there was a previous owner of the property, but he or she had already signed over their ownership. Bradley guessed that they had been too busy to join their meeting. As Bradley drove to his girlfriend's house, he was full of excitement as he was about to break the news to the love of his life. His hands were filled with chocolates, flowers, and wine as he made his way up the front steps of her apartment building, which she had been renting for years. Bradley couldn't contain his smile anymore when his girlfriend opened the door with a puzzled look on her face. He sat her down as she waited with eager anticipation. As soon as he broke the news about his home ownership in the suburban part of town, he noticed that the smile on his girlfriend's face fell. She tried again to appear excited about the news, but she couldn't fake it. With a deep sigh, she stood up and turned to him. She told him that she was very happy for him and that he had achieved this goal in life by becoming a homeowner at a relatively young age. However, she did not want to settle in a suburban house. She told him that she had had the idea to travel around the world this summer. She didn't want to spend it moving and unpacking. Bradley tried to meet her in the middle. He told her that they could move in and then plan their vacation where they travel all over the world. However, the girlfriend seemed to not be interested in this part of the conversation. She said this just showed her that she and Bradley were two different people and that couldn't ever settle down together in a home. She wanted to be a citizen of the world and travel. With this, she thought it would be best if they broke up. Bradley was stunned. How could this day start so great and end so badly? He didn't even try to convince the young woman anymore. He picked up his keys and walked out of her apartment. The young man, still confused and hurt, drove around the city for a while before deciding to go over to his recently bought home. He had the keys already, and while it would take some time for the house to be cleaned up and his things to be brought and moved in, he didn't mind going in. He had several viewings of the property before today, but never for longer than a few minutes. The previous owner was a fast talker and a busy man who always seemed to be in a hurry. Bradley pulled up into the wide driveway of the new house. The sun was high in the sky and its light reflected off the windows. Bradley still had some excitement in him despite the breakup. He walked into his new home and stood there to take it all in. He admired the pieces of furniture in the hallways. Some he could definitely keep and others he was eager to sell. He moved over to the kitchen and examined the clean marble countertop. Bradley wandered into the center of the hallway just below the lavish staircase and chandelier. It was a grand space. He was thinking about it and the kind of legendary parties that he could throw here, and then something caught him off guard. He heard a groan and then a moan coming from somewhere in the house. His heart skipped a beat. His first thought is that the house was haunted. It explained why the old owner was in such a rush to sell. He has stuck me in this haunted house. He heard a cough coming from one place or another. He froze for a second as he tried to hear where the sounds were coming from. It was from upstairs. In all his viewings of the property, he had never ventured upstairs, but had only seen pictures and videos of upstairs. The cellar seemed more and more suspicious to Bradley as he climbed up the stairs and followed the noises. He peered into a room where the door was slightly ajar. To his utter amazement, He saw a young woman lying on the bed wearing nothing but a robe, lying down coughing heavily. What was going on? Who was this and what was she doing in his house? Bradley stepped into the room fully, and he noticed the woman's eyes filled with the same shock as him. Her eyes were darting at him and across the room as she tried to cover herself. Bradley turned away respectfully so she could be well covered. "Who are you?" the woman mumbled, honestly confused. With his back still turned to her, Bradley replied that he was the new homeowner. Just then, the woman began to curse under her breath until it became another cough. Bradley turned around and rushed over to help her. She coughed into a bucket, and Bradley noticed that she had wiped some blood off of her lips onto a tissue. "My bastard ex-husband sold you this place, right?" she said, a grimace forming on her face. Bradley was not expecting this at all. He had been caught up in some kind of marriage dispute. He sat down next to the woman as he watched her struggle to sit up. He tried to help her, but she shook him off and eventually sat up by herself. She began telling him the story of her and her ex-husband. They had been in love when they got married a few years ago and had this house built together. Shortly after that, the young woman became very sick and she was diagnosed with cancer. At first, her ex-husband was sweet and caring and did everything he could to help her. Eventually, her cancer became worse and more expensive, and there was an intense surgery that the doctors recommended would help the young woman recover. But at this point, her ex-husband no longer wanted to spend so much money on his wife, so he abandoned her in the house and sent divorce papers shortly after. She had no strength or money to get a divorce lawyer, so had just signed the papers hoping that the pain of abandonment would go away. She didn't think her ex-husband would be so cruel to sell the house mere weeks after the divorce was settled. She had nowhere to go now. Tears filled her eyes as she recounted the story. Bradley was so shaken by the cruel nature of her ex-husband. He could not believe it was the same man he shook hands with and did business with. It all made sense now why he had been in such a hurry and so quick to get the sale concluded. It even explained why he had never been allowed to fully view the home. Bradley felt defeated. He couldn't imagine the physical and emotional pain this woman was going through. "Can I ask what your name is?" he said as he stared down at her in awe and pity. "Angel," she said. And in that moment, Bradley couldn't agree more. She really did look like an angel. The name sounded familiar to him. It was the name of the other owner of the property. He had seen the name on the transfer document. Of course, her fraudulent ex-husband had probably forged her signature. Just then, Bradley called up the previous homeowner, the young woman's ex-husband. He explained his complete shock and outrage at what he had found in the property, a very ill woman who had clearly been neglected. The fraudulent man on the phone had his answer ready, and he said it without a care in the world. "Don't forget, you bought the house 3 times below market rate. As for the woman in the bedroom, she will die soon, so you won't have any problem with that." Bradley asked Angel about her family. Surely there was someone out there who could help her. The young woman sighed sadly, close to tears. The only living relative she had left was her mother. But the last she had heard, her mother had remarried a much younger man who lived in a different state. She hadn't spoke to her mother in years, and she even found out that her mother had given birth to another child. The young lady said the last time she had tried to reach out to her mother, she was told to live her life and stop interrupting others. After that, Angel hadn't reached out to her mother again. Bradley felt terrible, and that he was partly to blame for what was happening to Angel right now. He had been an easy target for such a fraudulent transaction. Despite this, he was determined to treat Angel right and not push her out of her home. He would also take care of her and help her with her treatment. He said all of this in his head, as he didn't think Angel would agree to all of this if she heard him say it out loud. The next month went by, and the young woman and man lived together in the house, in the infamous house. As awkward as the situation might have been, they lived together and made it work. Bradley took care of Angel, drove her to the hospital for her appointments, and made sure she took all of her medications. Eventually, she was enrolled back into the program for the intense surgery, and she was at the top of the list. Bradley told her that he would take care of it, because he had gotten a promotion at work. This was not particularly true, as he hadn't received the promotion yet, but he had been promised one. So Bradley sold his car, unknown to Angel, and was able to pay for her medical treatment and post-op care. He didn't care if he had to take public transportation or carpool for the next few months, as long as he could see Angel had a chance at getting a better life. The operation was successful, and the doctor said that the young lady would make a full recovery. When she woke up from her surgery, the first person she saw was Bradley, and he looked like her knight in shining armor. She smiled at him and grabbed his hand. She was grateful that fate had brought them together at that house. Bradley explained that he had someone who wanted to see Angel, and as he opened the door, in walked Angel's mother. She looked tearful and sad. She apologized to her daughter with tears in her eyes. She had been selfish and did not know how bad it had gotten. She hoped that Angel would be able to forgive her. The room was filled with emotion and happy tears, and Angel forgave her mother and pulled her in for a tight hug. Bradley stepped out of the room to give her mother and daughter some privacy. He met Angel's stepdad and half-sibling sitting in the waiting room. He introduced himself politely, and the two men got to talking. It turned out Angel's stepdad ran a partnership with Bradley's current firm, and the two men began to talk business. After about a month of remission and recovery, Angel was free to go, and the doctors gave her a clean bill of health. The treatment had worked, and she was cancer-free. The two returned to the house that they shared, but this time the air was different. There was no longer the stress or anxiety of cancer treatment or uncertainty of how they felt about each other. Bradley and Angel began to fall deeply in love with each other. Together, they renovated the house so that it was something that they both liked. They took trips every few weeks to see Angel's mother and new family so they could rebuild their bond. Bradley cherished the strong and brave woman he met, who despite all odds was a resilient fighter, and Angel adored the charming sweetheart who took care of her, no questions asked. It was as if the two were each other's good luck charm. Bradley not only got a promotion in his firm, but because of the partnership his firm had with Angel's stepdad, Bradley was even given the second highest promotion in his firm, where he earned a lot more money and he had more freedom. Equally, Angel's cancer had gone into full remission, and she had just started her interior decorating business. On an evening when the sky was full of stars and the moon was a perfect crescent, Bradley proposed to Angel in their backyard on a swing set he had built for her. It was beautiful, and with tears in her eyes, the young woman accepted his proposal, ready to open her heart to love again. Their wedding was a cute and quiet wedding by the lake, and all their closest friends and family were in attendance as the two made their vows to each other, overlooking the calm, still water. They knew that this was the right decision to make, and they knew that fate had brought them together forever.